Hello everyone, I hope everyone's doing well during the pandemic and that everyone's staying safe. My name is Michael. I'll be talking about the UCI fertility clinic scandal that occurred in our backyard within very proximity in Orange County. I have attached a small video for the class to watch in regards to this scandal and how it kind of played out in our state and how it kind of affected the laws and how the approach with fertility programs or treatment was approached due to this.
June 6th, 1995.
We had a lot of problems during those 5 years, and so we were ready to be aggressive and do anything that we could to get pregnant.
Thousands of couples came here looking for a miracle. What some found instead may turn into a nightmare.
One had a child at the clinic, and they were concerned about the biological origins of that child.
I have seen a copy of a log that shows from one of my clients her eggs going to another patient.
Tonight, the scandal, the ethics, the murky multi-million-dollar business of making babies.
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Cokie Roberts.
Most of us know someone, a member of the family, a good friend, who's gone through all kinds of pain and effort to have a baby. The stories are often heartbreaking as they tell of incredible indignities suffered at considerable cost that sometimes result in the great joy of having a child, but when it comes to the more high-tech methods, many couples are disappointed. Suppose you added a scandal to this already stressful situation. Suppose the doctor you had come to see as your savior was secretly taking advantage of you, using your eggs, part of your body, without your knowledge, and planting them in other women. That's alleged to have happened at one of the world's most reputable fertility clinics at the University of California in Irvine. The doctors there deny the charges, but the university finds them so credible that it recently closed the clinic. Here's ABC's Tom Foreman.
If it is true, it is a violation of every medical ethic and not a few laws. If it is true, it could destroy careers and tear families apart. Larry Feldman represents two of the women who believe their fertilized eggs were given to others.
The ramifications are unbelievable. Is a child an heir of these parents? Could the child, do you have to provide for these? Would you be able to get this child if you wanted to get custody? Should you?
Have your clients shown any indication of wanting to do that?
They want to know the answers. They want to know the answers.
In the search for answers, last week, the University of California, Irvine ordered the world-renowned Center for Reproductive Health to close its doors. The founder, Dr. Ricardo Ash, is accused of taking eggs from women, fertilizing them, and putting them into others without the biological mother's consent, the procedures resulting in at least 3 births. He is also accused of taking eggs from women for research without permission. Sidney Golub is a vice chancellor at UCI.
Our evidence is credible. We would not have gone forward with this investigation with the vigor that we did in the absence of credible evidence.
Lloyd Charton is the doctor's attorney.
Dr. Ash denies each and every one of the allegations of wrongdoing. At no time did he ever do anything that wasn't consistent with the desires of his patients.
And that is the problem for former patients. It is impossible to know right now who is telling the truth.
We feel that gift could be a good treatment for you.
7 years ago, Bill and Wanda Nagy were featured on ABC's 2020 when they went to the clinic. She had tried to get pregnant for years with no luck.
Hello? Am I?
Are you?
I'm very, very pregnant.
Oh, great.
Using a procedure called GIFT, which Dr. Ash pioneered, eggs were removed from Wanda and united with Bill's sperm inside Wanda's fallopian tubes. The result? Twins. The Nagys allowed the clinic to place 9 more embryos into frozen storage in case they might want more children. When the scandal broke, suddenly they worried. Perhaps those children were already born.
we wouldn't have known the type of family that those children were raised in. We would have no control over their upbringing, no control over any facet of their life, and it would be very difficult to live with that knowledge that there are children out there that are ours.
To understand how such a thing might have happened, it is perhaps better at this point to ask why.
How did they look?
11 years ago, Dr. Ricardo Ash was a miracle worker. His gift procedure was a major breakthrough, touted as considerably more effective than in vitro fertilization, IVF, which was itself only a few years old.
When you average all the patients in which gift is being done, about 35% of all of them will become pregnant. If you compare that success to the success of IVF, it's practically double.
But in recent years, other advances have pushed gift out of the limelight. Couple that with the growing number of fertility clinics competing for patients, and some suggest the doctor had plenty of reasons to want both more eggs for research and more pregnancies in his clinic.
What is unclear at this point is, did these doctors do this intentionally, with fully knowing this for some profit motive, as some of the evidence seems to indicate?
Or is the whole scandal the result of accidents, mistakes? University administrators believe clinic records might answer those questions, but so far the doctors have refused to release them, saying they are confidential. The school is suing for the documents.
We don't understand why we haven't been provided with these records. We're astonished that we haven't been provided with these records.
Federal authorities have made it clear the university could lose $14 million a year in research money if improprieties exist and are not adequately addressed. And since the clinic was staffed by university employees, if a mix-up occurred in the lab or storage, the doctor may not be the only one liable.
You have to understand, Dr. Ash didn't go in the morning, unlock the door, clean up, do the paperwork, sign the forms, track the forms. He's a surgeon. He harvests eggs. He does surgical procedures.
School administrators indicate they are willing to accept blame.
If we bear responsibilities in areas, then we need to correct them and deal with them. But we want the truth.
Still, the university paid almost $1 million to 3 school employees who first reported the problems, and a condition of the payments is that they not talk publicly about the case. The patient's attorney thinks both sides are trying to hide the facts, to hide their own culpability.
It really doesn't matter which one of these people did it. They're both responsible.
The doctor's attorney says there is one other possible explanation: extortion. Shortly before the scandal became public, the doctor says this letter showed up at the clinic, demanding $300,000, signed Dr. Malcolm X.
When Dr. Ash received the letter, he made it clear at the clinic that no, he wasn't paying any money because he hadn't done anything wrong, and then the allegation surfaced.
Right now, there are at least 7 different investigations going on into this whole affair, by the university, by the state medical board, by the local district attorney, even the National Institutes of Health. So far, no one has been proven guilty of doing anything wrong. The Nagys finally demanded answers. They are now convinced their embryos are stored safely at this other clinic, operated by an associate of Dr. Ash.
You are content now that there's not a problem with what happened in your lives.
That's correct.
But this was something that you did need. You needed something more than somebody's word now.
Yes.
But while the Nagys were reassured, and the problems are alleged to have happened to only a very few patients, thousands of couples have gone to the clinic over the years, and now many of them have been caught between the university's allegations and the doctors they trusted, wondering who is telling the truth and what, if anything, really went wrong. For Nightline, this is Tom Foreman in Irvine, California.
A little background to the history of this scandal. Dr. Ash was first started in the Garden Grove Clinic, where he introduces a new method called GIFT, which is gamete intra-fallopian tube transfer, where it was using gametes from both male and female couples to produce an embryo that would be redeveloped or reimplanted into the fallopian tubes. However, in the 1990s, they moved from the Garden Grove Clinic to the Irvine Medical Center. However, in 1994, there were a few whistleblowers that was reporting them for fraud and some scandals that was occurring. However, the lawsuit did not result for Dr. Asher, until 1995, which he actually fled the country. In this case, our plaintiffs are the patients who are receiving medical treatment at the fertility clinics. That includes 7 married couples and 1 unmarried woman who were having some difficulty with getting pregnant or conceiving a proper child or even completing a proper pregnancy. Some of them are such as Mr. and Mrs. Crawford, Miss Kirk, were at this clinic having the eggs and sperms being removed for proper insemination or even combination within a petri dish before injecting into the fallopian tube or the uterus of the female. However, these families also received some bad news later on once they found out that their gametes were stolen and used for other purposes that were not consented to by the people or the patients that were receiving treatment at the time. In this case, our defendants would be Dr. Ricardo Asher, Dr. Jose Balameda, Dr. Sergio Stone, the clinical staff, the regents of the University of California who employed the doctors, and also Center for Reproductive Health, both the fertility clinic in Garden Grove and UCI Medical Centers that were responsible for housing these doctors and staff while they proceed with these procedures and transplants that were both legal and illegal for the patients. During this incident, we had some whistleblowers such as Miss Marilyn Killen, who is the office manager, who saw some of these doctors performing some illegal actions such as taking envelopes of cash out from the office while accepting cash payment, who reported to her senior associate director, which is Deborah Kroll, who attempted to launch an investigation through UCI. However, that was turned down and they were told to be quiet. And then once the senior administrative analyst, Carol Catchum, was able to find out some other information that was not correct and there were some discrepancies, and then she tried to launch an investigation, and while she was launching that investigation, the senior associate director and office manager were put on administrative leave for that case as well. For the civil liabilities portion, I'll be looking into the fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, some embezzlement, respondent superior, and also res ipsa loquitur in regards to this case and how the doctors and the staff may have violated and caused some harm towards the patient, even though it was not intended. We'll be also looking at other areas such as possible conspiracies, batteries, conversions that may have occurred, and also how they may have violated a Hippocratic oath that they'd taken when they became doctors. Some civil liabilities we saw were such as insemination fraud, where the doctors were taking gametes from the patients and using it not just for those women's gestations or implantations for the birth, they were also using the gametes for other research purposes or implanting in other women to increase their success rate of the clinic, which in order to give them a much better representation of the procedures they're using, which was gift. However, most of these were done without consent, so that led to a number of fraud due to the misconsent from the actual patient that was giving the gametes. And also there was levels of embezzlement that were seen where doctors were walking out of the offices with envelopes of cash that they signed for, and that the annual cash income was up to $300,000 in cash that was not accounted for. And then Dr. Eschert has been given or walked out with as much as $12,000 in cash in a day, which these doctors failed to report to funds or any gains or profits they had for these procedures, which resulted in almost $1 million in funds over 2 years that they did not report. During the procedures of the gift that was used, patients that came in who were unable to conceive or had fertility issues were given eggs and sperms to unite and be used in the gift method so that they would be able to bore children. However, some of the excess embryos that were supposed to be cryogenically frozen or kept at a different facility were actually taken out and used and implanted in other women and had successful rates. However, those patients that were trying to bore these children did not know of these biological children were being born to other couples, and so therefore when they were able to find out, they had some distress where they should have had access to those children or be a part of that children's life that they were not known until decades later. While there's also the intent of spoliation of the evidence, where UCI was cutting deals with doctors to resign quietly to waive any interest within the patient records. UCI has cut almost a deal of $1 million with 3 clinical workers to keep them from exposing or talking about the scandal in public, so they were able to hide the scandal and not show it out to light in the public views. In this case, we saw a number of conversions where these doctors were taking these eggs from these women who were trying to impregnate or have children and were unable to, and they were taking these eggs and putting them in other women for the benefits of making a profit so that they can increase their own intent of increasing their success rate. As well as there's a possible chance of battery where these doctors were implanting eggs or embryos into other women without stating exactly who was the recipient or where it was coming from, and which was false applications of the eggs, sperms, and or embryos within other women to increase the success rate. And these two would be linked together as they are taking a property from another couple and implanting them into either another couple's fallopian tubes or uterus, or just an individual woman who's trying to have a child without the proper consent that is coming from the actual donor or the actual patient that is attempting for the proper fertilization or production of an actual child. Well, one of the larger liabilities I found was negligence, where the providers had a duty to safeguard and provide the proper service that the patients needed involving their gametes and embryos to help them conceive a child. However, they breached this duty by stealing these gametes and embryos and implanting them in other women for cash, leading to damage where they cause emotional distress, anxiety, or stress to the patients when they found out that they had biological children that were born that they had no idea about until decades later. This causation was coming from the misuse of these patient gametes and embryos for the profit and to increase success rate within the clinics. Within this case, it was very surprising how the doctrine of respondeat superior and the doctrine of res ipsa loquitur was able to be applicable. As in under the respondeat superior, we saw that the clinical staff that working under doctors did not report what was going on and were actually going along with it, and that they also assisted within the implantation or matching of embryos to the patient as the doctor requested. While for the res ipsa loquitur, we will see that the physical biometric physiques of these child would have similar physiques of their parents' gametes when they were mixed. And then with proper DNA testing these days, we were able to reveal that the correct biological parents were not the one that actually bore the children, but the one who actually was trying to conceive and had their eggs frozen so that they can have future children or even possible conceive children down the road if they were unsuccessful. However, these eggs were taken and implanted into other women to help increase the clinic's fertility rate, which was a fact that can be shown through the physical biometrics or physiques of the child that were born due to these gametes being implanted into other women. These doctors also violated their Hippocratic oath, which they took when they became medical doctors. During the first one that they violated was first do no harm, where the doctors bind by the oath so that they would not be violating or harming any patients in the present or the future. However, these doctors did not take that into account and were taking the eggs from the patients that were trying to conceive, who weren't be able to successfully conceive, and implanting them into other women that were able to conceive and bore these children properly. However, due to this, it caused a lot of harm or a lot of stress or infliction onto the patients that were trying to conceive a child. So therefore, they have violated the Hippocratic oath of first do no harm. Some criminal liabilities I found during this case was mail fraud, where there were mailing or electronic transmitting information in regards to fraud or scandal where there had been involving the embryos and how they're transacting or implanting or moving those embryos for profits, as well as tax fraud where they're performing tax evasions by taking the number of transactions are complete in cash and not reporting them for proper funds within the account. And in the fails report about $967,000 within that 2 years, which are found to be violation of tax evasion. They also had some insurance fraud where they're falsely claiming claims and services that were provided without proper consent due to the embryos will not consent to be used for any other purposes such as research or for other implants to other patients. This caused some fraud issues that occurred for these doctors within the UCI medical facility. Other criminal liabilities that was found were criminal battery, where the users of eggs, sperms, and embryos were not consented for other purposes, such as inseminating other women. Those who were inseminated with these offsprings were not known whose offsprings they were, and the children who were born from suffering infertile couples' gametes to another couples or another fertile mother were not knowing of who they came from, and their biological parents were not revealed. There was also possible malice mischief where they were taking patients' property, in this case the gametes and embryos, without proper consent and using them for other gains or other purposes within the facility, such as research or profits by implanting in other women. These criminal liabilities were hard to stick to the doctors due to the statute of limitations that were expired within 2 to 10 years after inseminations, and most of these children did not know until decades later after the insemination occurred, and also the reliable evidence of how the procedures, or such as if there's any mix-ups within the facilities, was not able to be identified. Due to the evidentiary issues with the procedures that was agreed upon and the actual procedures that were performed were not completely documented or clearly stated within the files, or the files were lost during the closing of the cases and resigning of the doctors to prevent further investigations on these cases. These criminal liabilities were hard to stick to the doctors due to the statute of limitations that were expired within 2 to 10 years after inseminations, and most of these children did not know until decades later after the insemination occurred, and also the reliable evidence of how the procedures, or such as if there's any mix-ups within the facilities, was not able to be identified. Due to the evidentiary issues with the procedures that was agreed upon and the actual procedures that were performed were not completely documented or clearly stated within the files, or the files were lost during the closing of the cases and resigning of the doctors to prevent further investigations on these cases. Other regulatory issues that were found were family laws, which focuses upon the definition of parenthood, and that is based on the interest of the child or children that are born from the embryos, as well as looking at the gestational periods and ways that it's performed, as well as the genetics and social ties that would occur, such as consent from biological parents to allow for the implantation within surrogate mothers. Also, the HIPAA's regulations were also violated, as there was improper handling of medical records to hide the facts and issues that's occurring, as well as to bury the problem or scandal without having be rise to the public. There are also some unethical or immoral issues that arise, such as these doctors playing God, as in these doctors were able to do anything they like, feel like godlike, which includes taking the desperation of patients that were looking to have children and using it to gain or increase fertilization in other women without letting the biological parents who are desperate for their children. Also, they were breaching some medical ethics, as in they were not respecting some of the autonomy of the patients and respecting their rights in regards to their embryos, as well as non-malfeasance, where they were supposed to do no harm or evil to the patient, and that they're supposed to do good and justice for the patient. However, they violated this and took greed into their own hands, and then took the embryos and implanted them as they wanted into other patients for their benefits and gains within the clinic. Some of the resolution that occurred was the doctors who stayed behind and did not fled the state were fined for the insurance fraud, while UCI also paid out between 4.23 to 4.4 million in settlements to affected couples and up to 15 million in other legal assets. Also, they also developed a law which makes it a felony to transplant eggs without the donor's consent, and it's a crime punishable up to 5 years in prison and $50,000 in fine if sperm, eggs, or embryo are knowingly used without both donors and recipients' consent, as well as the second law that also requires physicians who remove sperms or over from a patient to acquire consent prior to using the materials for any procedures, either implantation in the patient's spouse or re-implantation with the same patient. So these ethic laws arises due to this fraud and scandal, so that they can prevent future causation where there can be misconceptions of where the embryos, eggs, or sperms are being implanted or coming from. This allows for more control and regulations on how these gametes are transported and used within the reproductive science. When the scandal was erupted into the public lights, Asher suspended his practice and sold all his properties and fled to Mexico. While in Mexico, he testified at deposition in Tijuana that the employees were responsible for the errors, which means they were mixing up the gametes that he was supposed to implant. However, he did end up opening practice in Mexico and Argentina, who in 2000s, when in 2004 he was arrested in Argentina for fraud and acquitted for it. However, then in 2010 he was also re-arrested in Mexico. But however, he was released on bail due to double jeopardy of being acquitted in Argentina for the same issue of fraud within reproductive health. If you have any other questions, you're more than welcome to let me know. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. And thank you for listening to my presentation, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.